But I want to start with this. NFL executives. These are people that are paid a lot of money to make judgments on personnel, and most have been doing it for years and years and years and years. Not a lot of 20-year-old NFL execs. A lot of 35, 55, 65. People know what they're doing. So they ranked the NFC teams 1 through 16 and the AFC teams 1 through 16. So let's start with the NFC. I view that as a harder conference to predict, a little weaker at the top than the AFC, not nearly as many great young quarterbacks as the AFC. I think the NFC is now the weaker of the two conferences, especially at the top. But it is very interesting. In the weaker conference, where do the NFL executives put the Dallas Cowboys? Right in the middle. 7th. In fact, no executive in the entire league voted them above 6, yet none voted them below 9. It is unanimous, their average in the weaker conference. I've always been fascinated by something, and I think I have the answer. I'm always amazed when really smart, successful people can't see obvious stuff. You're successful, you're smart, you went to the right schools. Well, that's obvious. What are you doing? Dallas, of course, has two issues, and they've had these now for several years. And I'm amazed Jerry Jones can't spot them. And the only answer is ego. And this is often the problem with men, is that if smart men are not acknowledging obvious stuff, they see it, right? They just got an ego and they can't get through it. So Dallas has two problems. Number one, they pay good players, great money. That's a death sentence in the NFL. But why does Dallas do that? Because of their second issue. They've become increasingly insular. We don't need any external voices. We have everything figured out here. So when Dallas drafts players and pays them a lot, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Our guys are great. No, they're good. You're paying them great money. Dallas does it different than all the top teams in the league, like a Buffalo or a New England. New England just spent $120 million on free agents. Kansas City, all the other top teams in the league acknowledge, Rams, Seattle, that organization did a good job to draft that player that we passed on. We're going to go pay for that player. The top teams in this league have many of their own players, but a lot of other stars they've purchased, they've traded for other teams. Rams, Jalen Ramsey, Matt Stafford acknowledging, Sony Michel now. Andrew Whitworth, that was a Bengal guy, right? Aaron Donald is theirs, but they're acknowledging a lot of great players elsewhere. Seattle's doing that. They do that all the time, right? Jamal Adams, he's not ours, but he's great. Dwayne Brown, not ours, but he's great. Not the Cowboys. Outside of Amari Cooper, their entire roster of well-compensated players, we drafted them, we know better, they're ours, we're paying them well. And those are the two problems, is that they pay good players great money, and they become increasingly insular. And you see this all the time in America. Let's say somebody's got, they've got a car emporium. They own a car business, a big dealership. And they got all their kids working in the dealership. And it's a big city. It's a Cincinnati or a Philadelphia or a Denver or Los Angeles. They have all their kids working in the dealership. And then dad, the patriarch retires and the dealership goes down. Well, of course it does, because 75% of businesses fail when you hand them to the second generation. 95% fail when the second generation hands them to their kids, the third generation. They almost all fail. Why? Because the best people for any business are all over the place. They're not in your family. Believe it or not, if you have 7 kids, they're not the 7 smartest people in the world or in your town. You got to go get somebody that went to Wharton or Stanford and bring them into your family business to ask questions, to push back. Dallas doesn't do that. It's a family business. It's very insular. We know best. The minute Jimmy Johnson, Bill Parcells came in and pushed back, nope, get him out of here. Those are the two best coaches they've ever had. So, and the downside to Dallas is none of this is going to change for a decade. Why? Number one, the Jones family has shown they don't want external voices. And I'm not saying they're dopes. I think Charlotte's the rock star in the organization, but she doesn't do football. And then the second reason is Dak's good, and they're going to keep, and they just signed him, so he's going to be around for 8-9 years. He's good. I don't think he's great. He's good. So in this league, there's 4 components that matter. Owner, GM, coach, and quarterback. And 3 of those 4 in Dallas are not changing for probably 8 years. The one that will, coach, Jerry Jones, has shown reluctance to hire somebody that will push back. He wants basically somebody that will listen to him. And so I just think it's interesting. If you go look at two of the best college football programs in America, Alabama and Notre Dame, they were good. How did they get exceptional? They went outside the family. Nick Saban had no connection to Alabama. Brian Kelly, Notre Dame. The way to go from good to great is almost always the same answer. You need another voice in the room. A man or a woman, somebody that will push back and say, yeah, let me give you a new pair of eyes. Let me give you a fresh set of ears here. Dallas won't do that. And that's why, according to executives, they are right in the middle of the lesser of two conferences. They're average. You want to go from average to great? You have to listen to people outside the family. It's uncomfortable. That's how you do it. All right, let's go to the AFC. And this is very interesting. Now, the AFC, I think, is a much easier conference to predict because you have these great head coach quarterback combinations, Reed, Mahomes, Lamar, Harbaugh, McDermott, Josh Allen. It's much easier to predict. The top is very, very strong. And let's be honest, if Mac Jones can play, in fact, the top 6 of the AFC rankings, according to execs, I agree, right down the line. Chiefs 1, Bills 2, Ravens 3, Browns 4, Colts 5, Chargers 6. Totally agree. I would flip the Titans at 7-8 and the Patriots 8-7, but really the top 8 I almost all agree. And I do think it's the better conference right now because of the great young quarterback play. But do you notice where Miami is? 11. Not a playoff team. They quote 2 of the executives in the NFL. One says, I'll believe it when I see it with the quarterback. The other says they're not going to run interceptions back to the 5-yard line every other week like last year. So this is why I said before last year's draft, you better draft a quarterback because there's 5 good ones and you're going to be way too good to get in that top 5 or 6 in the next decade. And it's also why I refuse to back down on Tua. Watch the games. And what's interesting is he plays Mac Jones in week 1, and he's an underdog. And this is fascinating. Think about that. Mac Jones only started 1 year of college. That's it. That's usually trouble. And he's never taken an NFL snap live against the first-team defense. And Miami's defense last year was number 1 third down defense in the league, number 1 in takeaways, top 3 fewest penalties, and they won 10 games. They returned their quarterback, and they're an underdog to Mac Jones. Same division. Why? Because Tua had 2 wins last year, throwing for under 200 yards. That's 1978 football. So last year I went 7 for 7 predicting the AFC. It's not brilliance, although that needs to be considered. It's because the AFC is an easier conference to predict. But what they're telling you, remember this, since 1991, 4 teams, new teams every year, make the playoffs. Every single year since 1991, 4 teams minimum that didn't make the playoffs do, and 4 teams that made the playoffs don't. Every single year. So Miami didn't last year. They were an inch away, and executives are telling you, oh, no, they're going to go backwards because they're not going to get every break. Their schedule is, inarguably, much tougher this year, and New England's back. So this is the Tua dilemma. And Miami, unlike Dallas, which I just talked about, smart people don't get obvious stuff. Miami does. This is the good news for Miami. They do. That's why the Deshaun Watson rumors happen this week. They see it. They see that New England now has a quarterback that fits. They see how good Josh Allen is. They see the Jets are better than they've been the last 2 years. They see Tua at practice. Whereas Dallas, the ego gets in the way and they don't see obvious stuff. Like, get external voices in the organization. Miami going after Deshaun is actually a great, great sign if you're a Dolphin fan. They see their dilemma. The dilemma, all these executives are saying, yeah, they're like bottom half of the AFC. Miami sees it. Your exec sees it. Your coach sees it. Your GM sees it. Your owner sees it. And if Deshaun Watson wasn't in all this trouble, he'd be a Dolphin today. Because they're willing to give the picks up, reportedly, with all the stuff going on in his life. So sometimes bad news is good news. Miami, unlike Dallas, sees the issue and is trying to work on it. Dallas knows there's an issue and refuses to. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.